Alright, welcome. My name is Robbi Astral, and you have come to Robbi Tech. We are beginning a new series. There's a bit of dismay and definitely disparity providing the information that I receive from we're going to call them video bloggers and content creators on YouTube currently, and the dismay I'm feeling from them, particularly in reference to advice that's given pertaining to varying things that are PC tech related. They generally seem to cater towards enthusiast markets, these people that we're going to start looking at in this series. But keeping that in mind, as novices who go and try to even cross-reference the information gathered, the big players, and not necessarily the biggest or everyone, but big players in the YouTube industry, PC tech sectors, I find are providing misleading information that could potentially have a negative impact on us consumer viewers, which are essentially their bread and butter. But at the same time, the information that isn't completely transparent is being provided, sugarcoats their agendas at hand, and as a result is inaccurate regarding the accuracy which is perceived to be interpreted to be true from them. So what I'm essentially saying is I'm bringing into question the integrity of the industry on the whole, and there is a video that leads to this and leads to this series, which is there any integrity left in the IT industry, which is one of my first posts that I ever posted, another actual channel which I stripped it from and placed it on Robbi Tech recently. And it's some video that can sum up my feelings on the general spectrum. But now we're going to delve into the specifics, and specifically today we are starting off with Hardware Unboxed. I'm Australian, I'm a patriot, but it's no excuse for the way they are behaving. They're a little bit more difficult to critique, I would say, than some other YouTubers, be it large or small. But as perceived experts to an nth degree, they all have a duty of care that should be administered, because PCs now, especially in the last year or so, have not gone up 200 but almost 300% at times for the equivalence of high level enthusiast grade equipment, and they're big investments if you can justify them as an investment. Otherwise it's big expenditure nowadays. I believe that regardless of the amount, as these type of video content blogger creators, they all have a duty of care which should be adhered to, and at the very least disclaimers presented that the information may be borderline on the fictional basis of things. So without a moment's further ado, let us get into Hardware Unboxed's most recent Q&A part 1 session. The title of their video on YouTube, if you like to follow along, is "Where's the budget GPUs? Why the shortages? When is DDR5? January Q&A part 1. It's already had, since posted on January 28th, over 100,000 views, and this is the type of thing that dismays me. People are loving this sort of content, but the problem is the people hitting the like buttons seem to not realize that I've experienced this myself in the past. If it's inaccurate information that's being provided, it should really be disliked heavily, and people in the comments should be specifying these things. So the comments will feed the popularity of the video through the YouTube algorithm, but this is where we have to start committing to a change, people, because we have to stand up and acknowledge that regardless of production value, it's inexcusable the information that you're presenting. On the other hand, my production value is probably below par, but everything I make from this I reinvest back into it, so I'm sure within time it'll increase. I'm just hoping that the content I provide is concise, it's diligently always placed, but at most it holds my integrity to question and is an integral part of myself as a person, but I don't want to be fibbing on the basic end of the spectrum to people, especially stuff that may potentially hurt their hip pockets in the long run, definitely in the short run as well. So let's get into the video and let's see how I dissect it. I may not go through the whole video, it is about half an hour in length, but understand that it's not going to be pretty. I'll let the audio play, hopefully there isn't an issue with that, and at the times leading up to my comments, I'll give you a 20-30 second blurb of what's being said by the Hardware Unboxed team, which is Steve and Tim. Then I'll make my subsequent comment. If you want to see their full video, yeah, I'm actually promoting it in some way, shape or form, but this is to try to mitigate the forms of change which should be employed here, people. If you agree with me, you understand we have to stand up and not allow this to be the case, then check out their actual video and follow along with it so that you can see the visuals as well. You can exactly get the fuller picture of what's being said, especially when I sum up their basic intro to the point that I actually start making my first comment. There's about a 6-minute gap, and that 6-minute gap is enough time for them to receive a viewership point, but also to not retain their initial amount of views, because there's always a drop off with especially long videos the longer they play, and eventually you've got a core count of people who'll stay and watch that video. And as soon as that drop off occurs with them, analytically speaking, because these guys are smart, they then sort of invest their wording structure so it plays out more to their enthusiasts who are watching the whole video, if you get me. So the layman hears what they like, realize that this isn't for them, they have to go somewhere else. They don't get the bigger picture and they don't notice it over time. I've noticed these trends. I'm a semi-professional in the industry, in the IT industry, especially in my fields of hardware and whatnot. I'm an avid overclocker. I've got a HR major equivalent in human resources management, so I know that this stuff would be wrong, okay? You can't portray yourself in one light and do the other. That's borderline should be illegal in some fashion. So I'm not going to talk too much about my credentials on top of this. Just understand that I'm not here for viewers in that respect. I'm here to advocate for change in the industry on the whole. And we have to start with the people who are in front of our faces. And these are the type of people in front of our faces. Unless we're literally at a retail store and someone's quoting them using the falsified advice. Okay, guys? So let's get started, eh? Oh, and just before we begin, on a side note, understand that I'm not saying they are bad people at heart, but I do believe there's an undercurrent of this negative nature in the industry. And over the series of the next few videos, which are part of this series, I'm going to delve in and display. I'm not just going to be picking on Hardware Unboxed here. There are other players that I'll just name some names for the time being, like Brian from thankyou City, like Tech Deals, as well as even people in the players that I'm going to tackle, like Bitwit Kyle, Linus Tech itself, as well as even Steve Burke. Steve Burke, would you believe, from Gamers Nexus, has his hidden agendas which aren't completely cleanly and transparently laid out on the table, even though they would all make you believe that it is the case. And I'm sorry to do this. These were essentially the biggest players that I enjoyed watching the most. But while watching all this content, the small YouTubers that are emerging regarding tech who have high integrity values are being overshadowed by the YouTube algorithm, and we can't allow this to continue, people. Especially if you agree with my points, you understand the differences. Don't just shed a blind eye and turn your back to the situation. Understand that we can dislike, we can comment feverishly about certain time spots if you ever notice that there are inaccuracies. And what will happen at the very least, if they're not put into balance, we will put them into balance through our Checks and Balances Act, and they will at the very least change based upon their agendas, which is to gather as many viewers as they can because their stuff is essentially monetized. And the more viewers they have, the more money they make. They are businesses, essentially. Well, hopefully they clear their incomes and whatnot. So let's get into the video and let's see how it plays out. My heart is racing because I don't want to be perceived like an asshole. Understand where I'm coming from is an experienced set. And every time I make a point, I will try to rationalize and justify it accurately, whereas as quickly as I can, so that we can continue on, because some of these videos that we're going to dissect can be upwards of an hour's in time, and other videos on the other hand can be short unboxing videos. But that's the thing, if it's a short unboxing video, there's less potential for misleading information to be provided. And for entertainment purposes, the higher production costs are where, you know, Linus Tech's new channels and whatnot are making an impact. But again, we'll get to it. I've got my sources as well, which I can't name, but I also have hidden aces up my sleeves for when I believe retaliation negatively will occur where it isn't even warranted or justified, frankly. Especially if people are just listening to me, because the fanboys, there are always fanboys who just hate, and there are people in the industry who agree with the misrepresentation of the truth, essentially, on the basic end that's being provided by these people on the tube, guys. So let's get into it.
Unless you're a Patreon or Floatplane member, then you're your own set of individual questions that you can ask on our Discord chat. Anyway, probably enough waffle. We do have quite a few interesting questions to get into to kick off the first Q&A of 2021. So let's get into it.
Also, socials are in the top right corner of what we'll call the video. Please follow, like, and or subscribe. I appreciate all the support that I've been receiving. I do true unboxing videos. I do reviews and overviews of products and whatnot as soon as I get my hands on them. I'm currently on a limited budget, so I am trying my best. I can and understand everything. I'm up to date with all tech. I have a history of going back. I understand how to get the best performance out of every sort of a setup to the nth degree within reason, because in the IT industry is a progressive industry. You can fall behind rather quickly if you're not paying attention as well. So please hit that like button, please subscribe. We've got both Robbi Tech on YouTube, Facebook, we have Robbi Tech, Twitter at Robbi Tech, Twitch Robbi Tech for our live streams, which I'll probably do perhaps these type of events live on stream as well as live builds and whatnot, which will be for the Robbi Tech channel on Twitch. And then I'll utilize this footage and I will upload it to the YouTube and the Facebook pages. Facebook, on the other hand, is a sister site of Robbi Tech on YouTube. Does have all videos available there as well. So I'm actually doubling up instead of leaving a link there and taking my Facebook followers to YouTube, surprisingly. It's because I believe that Facebook is an established platform that is missing out the opportunity of producing content similar on the basis that YouTube does, rather than something of a comedic nature and content on the watch part of their aspect of things, which is, you know, above the humor grade of what you find on TikTok, but the disgusting nature of things like crazyshit.com or whatever they're called, you know, those type of websites. So it's a different demographic, and I believe that instead of leaving the platform, Facebook itself could try to retain its current users by allowing for this type of content to be on there as well and pressing it forward also. It will be a smart investment and wise option for an established place like Facebook. Unlike other places such as Floatplane, new content providers are not warranted or frankly wanted. They want big players to come into the game, and that's something for a later topic. As we get through 2, 3, 4 videos, I'm going to do a summary videos notes at the beginning, like I've sort of articulated myself today with the first one, rather than just get into the video straight away. And I'm going to start to shed that bigger picture for you to see as well. So my ace is up and ready to roll with. I'm ready to play. So let's go.
All right, first one here. Is there any point in releasing mining GPUs? Wouldn't miners still want gaming GPUs, as they could still sell it to gamers if cryptocurrency were to crash? So recovering a bit of the initial investment there, I suppose.
I might answer some of these questions prematurely for them. I'd hate to be the devil's advocate here, but they want to play to their viewers' strengths to maintain their audiences. At the moment, there's community outrage regarding this. So regardless, it's to do with wafer shortages. On a side note, I didn't want to already start to attack the bigger players, like potentially the people who may send me products because they see that I'm integrally sound. And if for some reason I dislike a product and it's sent to me, instead of giving it a negative review in that aspect, because I do require products and sponsors, okay, then I'll happily return the product to them with a thank you card saying, not this product. See, that's a smart way of doing it, rather than facetiously lying about what's actually occurring, because otherwise you wouldn't have products to review. It's sort of disgraceful, and I'm not going to name drop just yet the larger companies who are playing out similar aspects and similar fields of affairs. Let's just say that Hardware Unboxed has been scrutinized as well, and it's not by necessarily the cleanest image company, regardless of how quickly they try to repair the PR damage done. But on the other hand, Hardware Unboxed has to be held accountable for their flaws as well, and especially in regards to everything I've said leading up to this to date. So let's continue.
We don't know too much about mining because Tim and myself have never done any kind of mining. I imagine if you were just Joe Blow, some random guy that wants to do a mining rig in his garage, the incentive there to spend a bit more on gaming GPUs so that perhaps you could sell them if things went wrong. You've got a bit of an out there.
They, by the way, all know a bit more about mining, but they lead on. It's a taboo topic. You don't want to be affiliated with it because of the sensitive nature of the lack of GPUs in the market. At the very least, even if you do, you don't disclose, especially if you're trying to maintain a viewership that is apprehensive on that topic in itself and makes them feel negative in nature. You want to keep your viewers happy after all, don't you? And returning. On a pressing forward note, it becomes a lot clearer.
Recover funds when you want to upgrade later on, so I suppose that makes sense. As for what was the first part of the question, is there any point in releasing mining GPUs? Well, again, not a miner, so I don't know. It's not a sort of great thing for us to answer because we don't specialize in mining, but I imagine by not including display outputs and things like that, you can shave a bit of the cost off the graphics card, so they will be a bit cheaper to produce. How much, I'm not sure. We have seen mining cards.
Also, mining cards require sometimes custom BIOSes and whatnot to be as effective as possible. And just for the conspiracy theorists out there, just imagine the shortages occurring with GPUs, and based upon the larger players, the actual creators and manufacturers of these GPUs, having subsidiary undisclosed companies that are actually producing farms to begin with, okay? And as soon as crypto seems to diminish, of course we'll all of a sudden get less shortages of GPUs, so more will be available like it has always been in the past. But the irony and the interesting point here is just consider the fact, because as businesses, they're smart options, but they would not let you know. Using NVIDIA as an example, what they released before the 3000 series hype was their enterprise massive bandwidth gains / ability for custom servers and integrated equipment that can utilize what they have. Actually, it's like 500,000 megabits a second like there's some insane figures if you start looking back at what they actually were showing, and that's where they're making the bulk of their money. They talk about GPUs as printing money. These players know this. The last thing they want to do is say, we're not going to produce for you because we can only produce so much, and at the moment we need to produce for our hidden agendas as well. And I'm not going to latch onto NVIDIA too much. I love NVIDIA products. I wish they were available. I'm not saying that is fact. Okay, that's for the conspiracy theorists out there. But what is fact are the corrections I'm going to do on some of the things that they actually try to perceive to be as accurate information coming from the tubers. I have to start small. You know, I'm only a little guy, and I'm putting my face out there to be ridiculed as well. So hopefully I'm concise and accurate in my portrayal as much as I can be, so that even if you don't like what you're hearing, you at least agree with it and don't dislike me like everyone seems to turn their backs to if they disagree in disliking the content here, because the ratios, it's horseshit. If you actually had 100,000 people who understood what was going on here, if 100,000 of those people endorse this type of behavior, then what the hell is the world coming to, people? What is this world coming to?
Cards before, but I haven't really priced them against standard gaming cards. But I guess all the money you can save initially, it helps you recover that investment quicker, basically.
Yeah, I think it would depend as well the sort of setup that the card is in terms of cooling, for example. I'm sure that mining farms have slightly different cooling requirements to sort of your standard gaming rigs. So maybe your blower style cards would be more popular for mining rigs where they're all lined up on those boards. But I guess it really depends. Yeah, it's a kind of a toss up between what are the cost savings like in terms of removing the display ports and all that sort of thing, as opposed to is that worth it versus being able to sell the card to gamers later in the future. But we haven't seen too many mining specific GPUs made over the years. Most designs are still
At least
definitely gaming designs.
Yeah, at least at the markets that we sort of monitor, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a few designs for sure.
The markets that we monitor. That leaves a whole other market that obviously is undisclosed, you know, what markets, you know, but that's not what I'm all about. We're going to get into the nitty gritty, guys, and I do need to start warming up and relaxing so that when I do correct them properly on certain factual things in the way that they're perceiving it to be and trying to twist almost the truth, you'll see what's going on, because I don't want you guys to be steered wrong. I want to steer my viewers that I appreciate immensely, so please hit the like and the follow button. I want to steer you in the right direction, guys.
I'm wondering if you guys have seen any drop in viewers and engagement in general due to the current pessimistic market situation, shortages, price gouging, etc. Personally, I am losing interest and considering to tune out from the PC ecosystem as a whole for like a year because I'm tired of hearing only bad news.
Okay, now we start to get into it. I expected them to say that they've had a drastic increase in viewers. Where they start out is complete hogwash. Where they end up leading is the opposite of where they start out. So Steve at one stage should, I believe, acknowledge that they do have, when you look at the viewer counts, they're higher, yet they seem to say that it's not really the case. And yeah, the general consensus is they're starting to realize that people are unhappy with the current situation, so they don't want people like watching Hardware Unboxed reviews on cards are just almost a negative spiral effect for the viewership, because no one can get their hands on them, the majority can't, okay? And even when it comes to the low-end Spectrum cards, I don't believe it's going to be a difference, especially when higher cards are still sold. And if the yields are great, you know, if they're accumulating poor quality wafers and the yields aren't as nice, then those yields will go towards lower quality cards. Meaning, how bad are these yields? If it's like 80% crap and 20% of what's coming through is only adequate enough for the higher quality cards to sell, maybe there will be a great supply, but that's not how it works on a percentage level, guys. Otherwise, they wouldn't manufacture it to begin with. And generally speaking, they just lock things. They lock chips that can potentially be unlocked and perform better when yields were always great, just so that they could sell to a different market, because the cost of a high quality chip to a low quality chip on the same nanometer spectrum is fucking the same thing. It's the same cost of production pretty much, people. Anyway, I'm afraid what they're going to start saying is going to be ridiculed quite heavily by myself, so let's continue on.
Understandable.
Yeah, I think that's a very understandable position to hold. In terms of sort of our view count and engagement right now, I'd say it's a little bit down. I mean, we've been
Lies.
seeing less video or fewer videos as well, simply because it's a great time for us to take a break at this time of year. It's summer here in Australia. You know, advertising dollars aren't as plentiful at this time of year compared to the previous year, and also you know, it's a little bit of the availability situation.
Yeah, that's mostly
so
it.
that's probably impacting it as well. But I think we've definitely felt the sentiment from people that, for example, your AIB card reviews,
Yeah.
in times when those GPUs are new and available, like 5700 series last year,
Yep.
or was that the year before? Year before now, in 2019. Those videos could be very popular, but
Yep.
with the 30 series and the 6000 series, not as popular this time around because you can't buy them. So, yeah, I guess from that sense, has been a bit of a drop, but I think the channel's doing pretty well overall.
I mean, yeah.
What they're going back to is their budget orientated things, and what I don't like is the fact that that's fine, but you sort of have to pass the baton on and move on. And new content providers, and it may seem like I'm envious, I'm not envious, okay, but new content providers should be able to talk about budgets, Xeons and things like that. Why can't they do it as well? Well, they talk about the amount of content they have to provide. Literally, Steve's going to say he's got cards racked up. He's just not really too into it. So he's got the luxury of doing that, yet they'll produce content that is relevant to the viewers, get me? And they'll just play to those strengths for the viewerships. It's going to start making a lot more clarity and sense as we press forward, people. So I appreciate all the support and thanks for tuning in. My name's Robbi Astral at Robbi Tech. Let's continue on.
And we don't really care about the views too much, and
they don't care about the views too much. Mate, it's your bread and butter. If you don't have views, you don't produce. You don't have money coming in from it. Every 50,000 views is a set amount of dollars. You need to monetize at least a minimum 50,000 views per video to receive money from that video, okay? Do not completely just disregard what's being said based upon the fact that he's trying to play it as casually as he can to, you know, we love we want to produce what you guys ultimately want to produce, but why not review those AIB cards you got lying about so that once they do come in stock, we're aware of what to actually get. Oh, because you can't get them. Okay, so what are you starting to produce instead? Well, it's a downtime, but we're coming out with, you know, budget old GPUs, and whether they're worth it, like the RX, I think 570 or 580, which by the way, 4GB, if you need it now and can get it for its general price, if it's even new or secondhand, and equivalent general price for secondhand parts, not inflated parts, definitely grab that card. If you need something to tie you over, it'll give you something like 60 frames per second in Fortnite. Not much, but it's better than not having anything. And when it comes to resell, because you get your Primo card, it's not going to drop much in value that you'll lose out, and in the meantime you have something to tie you over, people.
That's right.
as you noted earlier, the views for this month or this time last year are now higher.
Yep.
So we're
that's
doing
right.
better in 2021 regardless of what's going on. So
For views for this time last year are higher. So he's referring for the first month of 2021. Of course it is. You've had negative publicity that was a positive publicity for you regarding the NVIDIA debacle, okay? And you've had additional recognition from the bigger players who, it seems like sometimes they're almost passing the baton on to each other, frankly. And that's a string of affairs that is borderline disgusting as well. Especially on a side note, I don't want to get into it too much, but I want to see where I want you guys to see where I'm going to go with this eventually. To the top of the food chain, after all. I'm going to climb my way up, you know. On your way up, please be nice. You never know when you're on your way down again, okay?
the views aren't so much of a concern for me. It's more just I've also lost interest massively. Like, I'm really struggling to make videos at the moment. Got a stack of various AMD and NVIDIA graphics cards that need to be reviewed. I will get to them. I'm trying to do like one a week at the moment, but it's kind of hard for me to make or get excited about making a video on these products when you guys can't buy them, and I don't know when you'll be able to buy them. Will it be in a couple of months, 6 months? Will it be this year? We don't know. So
It's going to be a long time, we do know. If it was in a month's time, he'd have those videos prepared, okay? He would. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's going to be a while, okay? And unfortunately, if there was any chance that it wasn't, these guys will be setting themselves up for those views to have those videos ready so that they can continue to make money.
I'm similar attitude to a lot of you guys in the comments, not super excited to review these things. And it's sort of getting a little bit off topic when they talk about reviewers getting all the cards. It's like, I don't really get excited by that because I need, like you guys, I need one graphics card. So and sometimes we're...
Steve, don't deny the fact that your job is to do this. So what content are you going to start producing that keeps people happy? That content has to be there once stuff and stock becomes available, and you automatically switch back to that mode. So do you see how he's being articulating himself? Do you feel like I'm overstepping myself and overreaching here? I don't want to scare you guys. It will get worse, not better.
I only got them on loan, so you know, we don't get everything for free as some people like to say. And for us, it's not about getting free hardware. It's about testing it out thoroughly to let you know whether it's a good purchase. And if that information at present isn't useful to you, then it takes a lot of the point out of doing it, a lot of the fun. I know it is, you know, critical information for a lot of you who are holding out, trying to get one, but still, for most of you who've given up, yeah, we sort of feel that over here.
Yeah, it's definitely like the core of our content is making recommendations for people buying stuff. So,
definitely,
you know, head-to-head comparison.
Definitely. The core of our content is making recommendations for people to buy stuff. So you're not going to do the reviews, or you are. Or once they're in stock, you're going to do them. But you guys generally get the stuff earlier so that people can make their accurate decisions once the stuff becomes available. You know, hence, you know, they got the cards a day before release, essentially a lot of those bigger YouTubers in that regards. Hence what Nvidia said they were going to not allow them to have, you know, and this formation of the players to support them. That was great, okay? But where's the support for newer content providers, okay? Where's the support? Why is it Linus Tech so hypocritical? And I'm going to drop the bombshell now. Why is Linus Tech so hypocritical when it comes to Floatplane? Do you notice that they're producing themselves an array of people on Floatplane which they continuously flog? You can easily join up, but to become a creator you have to be vetted. To be vetted, they will give you an excuse that they essentially want you to have 50,000 followers sort of thing going rock and rolling so that you can contribute, to be available on a platform that essentially pays you. New content providers, if they're not good enough and well enough presented, okay, then they won't get the pays. They won't get the pays anyway. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't diminish the capacity of your thing. So Linus Tech is starting up essentially a rival company to YouTube, where they've already taken over the algorithm that's available to YouTube itself. It's ridiculous. My Vines, I literally, on certain account profiles, which I scour and source information for, hopefully accurate, okay, that's why you have to always cross-reference your stuff anyway. But my Vines are just leached with Linus Tech, Gamers Nexus, Jay's 2 cents and everything. I clear and flush my DNS history and registry. I get rid of things. I have different accounts for different purposes. I am subscribed to them on different accounts. I use different browsers, and it's insane that I literally dislike certain videos on certain accounts so that they're not popping up, and as soon as you watch a minute of a video that it goes even into autoplay, the next set of Vines will just be all Linus Tech. It's insane. Okay, so he's taken over, but the hypocritical nature of this is the start out for himself and the way he places himself in the industry. He doesn't have to disclose all information. He's smart. He doesn't want to give away his company to investors in the sense of letting it go on the float and stock exchange, okay? But he's a prick as well, people. He ain't your friend. Trust me, okay? Because he's got a set of players that he's willing to pass the baton to and fro, back and forward to, which he's creating. And essentially, what that's negating is the ability for new content providers to flourish. And the idiosyncrasies involved here are that, would he ever admit to it? No, he wouldn't. Why? Because there's more competition. Realistically, it'd just be a watered down effect, okay, where you'd have a lot more people. Back in the day, the algorithm for YouTube 5-6 years ago still was different and allowed for new players into the mix. 10 years ago was a completely different story, obviously. We'll get more into line in a sec, but do I get hot under the collar, people? Under the collar. Let's continue on.
Comparisons is a lot of our content.
Yeah.
And a lot of content that we make as well in the later parts of the year, like sort of your holiday season, can be game testing as well. And this is also not a period for that.
Yeah.
So it's not like we can go from producing a lot of comparisons that make sense, just producing game benchmarks, because neither of those things are really happening at the moment.
As you say, it goes beyond just AIB graphics cards. As I said, I've got quite a few of those that I would like to look at normally. I'd be all over it doing roundups, and as Tim mentioned, we did that with the 5700 series, the 5600 series, and I would have loved to have done a lot of like entry-level 3080s and 3070s, but you guys aren't really enjoying that content, or at least a lot of you. And yeah, it goes beyond just AIB graphics cards, because we do a lot of CPU versus CPU head-to-head type stuff, GPU versus GPU head-to-head stuff, and that's, again, all really buying advice. So if you can't buy it, there's really no need to give that advice. So yeah, we're kind of just as bummed out as you guys are, and we're hoping things improve, but it looks like it's not going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think I'll stick to getting through what I've got. I've already been rejecting a lot of AIB cards. There's a new, I probably shouldn't mention the name because I don't know.
He's doing it for us, people. Remember that. He's doing it for us. He's rejecting new content that he can produce. So how are they going to make money? How are they going to get an income? Or they're just, you know what I mean? Like, what's going on here? What is he trying to say? Are we shutting shop as you've just gotten as more popular than ever before? But obviously you're not, but you are, if you correct yourself just a little down the track. Let's continue on, people. It becomes farcical. It becomes farcical, especially when we start getting into the advice given pertaining to certain hardware and the truth about the scope and portrayal of that advice based upon benchmarks, which are sort of fairy benchmarks once you understand what's going on. To this day, who's actually playing Shadow of the Tomb Raider is another story in my eyes, but that's just on the side note. Yeah, let's continue on, people. So I'm not feeling really good about this, but I have to press forward, guys, because essentially the hypocrisy that, you know, Steve especially is saying, this is for the viewers, this is why I'm not doing the AIBs, this is why I'm not doing this, but the viewers and us see the problems and flaws in the way they're displaying and portraying the information they provide as well, then for the viewers they will change. And guess why? I myself am dismayed. I love watching all of them. I love it. I do love the content, but not when it's falsely presented based upon hidden agendas or just inaccurate information that's being perceived as factual because of their production value capabilities. Okay, it's just free views they get, and either people move on or people actually are purchasing equipment based upon these reviews, and yeah, then they either don't realize the difference, or because they're novices, or they've just lost a viewer, but they just keep bolstering their numbers up. So for their own sakes, this has to be done, because one day people will notice what the fuck's going on. Industry and social norms have to change, okay? And we can only start with ourselves and the people around us. But if these people want to have the positions they have, they are in our faces, they are around us, they're in our homes. They want to be in our presence for the viewership numbers so that they can continue on. Then things have to start changing, people.
If they've announced it yet, but there's a few new, very interesting looking graphics cards coming out, but of course none of you are particularly interested because your chances of buying it are virtually nil. So normally I'd be all over that stuff, really excited to get it and test it out as quick as it can for you guys.
Again, isn't it better Isn't it better to have the content already provided and ready to roll for as soon as they become available as a business standpoint for yourself? Wouldn't that be the wiser option? I don't really feel like doing it. Then what are you here for? Why are we watching you exactly? If you go to their Facebook page, they literally presented to push you into their YouTube page, as opposed to the way I have my own Facebook page where you can chill out and watch all the same content, frankly. But their little description, apart from being on YouTube, is new hardware reviews. Okay, that's all it is,
guys. But I've rejected tons of them and just said to the contacts at the companies, look, I'm sorry, we're not going to cover that. We've already got a lot that we don't necessarily want to cover because people aren't interested. So
yep,
if availability.
And I'll tell you what, these guys, their averages are between 50 to 100,000 views on certain clips within a 1 to 1 month ratio. Do they go up? Do they stay current in information? Do they continue to rise? It depends on the video, but they're 50 to 100,000, so they're getting their basic checks from YouTube pertaining to this, okay? Then they've got their sponsoring and ad revenue dollars and whatnot, okay?
The improves, we'll look at that product in the future. Are there any interesting monitors coming up in the next months?
Let's change the topic very quickly. So we're going to talk about monitors, and we're going to talk about old stock that's also not available, by the way. Old stock isn't available either, okay? Everything's gone. Everything's gone. Everything has gone up in price. Everything has gone up in price considerably. These guys are aware of this as well. It's ridiculous. That's why we're waiting for these budget GPUs to enter the market. Unfortunately, when you look at it logically, a 3060, okay, a 3060 is still GDDR6 RAM. It's the 3080s and 3090s that have the new GDDR6X RAM that is actually quicker and better performing, okay? GDDR6 has been around from the 2000 series era, okay? There might be slightly more CUDA cores, there might be better RTX development on these cards in some way, shape or form, but when it comes to a 3060, it's going to be, and playing Cyberpunk, you're still going to have to decide, do you want RTX on or do you want it off? And on will be a considerable drop in the performance of that card. Why? Because it's essentially like a 2000 series card, people. It's sort of ridiculous once you start to understand what's going on. Because yeah, guys, it's crazy. It's fucking crazy what's going on in this industry and how it's being depicted. Why? Because they themselves have to protect their interests and investments as well. Then please stop sugarcoating your shit and telling us it is what it is or it isn't what it isn't, because that never seems to be the case once you understand the fundamentals and you have further knowledge in the industry itself. By then, you don't need to listen to this stuff. You can do the research yourself. And it's a shame people don't question, or some people in my position who understand what's going on aren't raising their hand and going, this is horseshit. Because from 100,000 views, they've got almost 7K likes and only 91 dislikes for this video in particular. Okay, so it would have been easier maybe tackling, like, is now worse than Turing era, worst GPU markets, the shortages, just life now. One of those videos from him. There's a lot of other videos that would have, but this is just the most current video which I had playing, and I started to get rivaled up on, so I needed to go back. I'll probably leave the last 10 minutes of it, so there'll be enough around a picture. We're gonna have to cut a bit out of this because there's a bit of me just essentially warming up and just trying to reinvest my soul essentially into this, because it's an integral part of myself. And for integrity to shine, you have to be true to oneself, don't you, as well?
Especially ones with good value. Any good value monitors on the horizon?
Well, the good thing for the monitor market is that while availability is not great, and certainly there are lots of products out of stock, it's not as dire as the CPU and GPU market. So at times you can still buy products from different companies. So that's good. Interesting monitors. I think most of the stuff that's been announced that's coming sort of the first couple of quarters of this year are more your high-end stuff, because companies always want to get you around to buying high-end products. So we've seen, you know, your 1440p 240 hertz monitors, your 4K 144 hertz HDR, new ultra wides. Those have made the bulk of the announcements so far. So I think you're really excited about the 32-inch 4K.
Interestingly, out of all the hardware that's coming
Yeah.
out this year, the thing that I'm most excited about is a monitor. So
Yeah.
I haven't done monitor shopping for quite some time.
Okay, just on the side note to elaborate what's going on here, companies will always come out with the premium products, but the bulk of the sales, and the same comes through to the GPU market. If I use the GPU market as an example, companies will come out with their premium products to develop and show the edge that they are the better performing, better perceived retailer in that specific sector, or to showcase themselves as best they can. Okay, it's just smart business. Okay, just like you have those 3080s, 3090s, in the long run of things, they won't be the highest selling GPUs from the 3000 series saga. Okay, they won't be. Okay, but for the time being, once these shortages are continuing, they will try to make as much profit as they can, so 3080s, 3090s will continue to produce, and those El Cheapo cards will be less than forthcoming because of the fact that if the yields are clear, they are printing money and they sell out instantly regardless. Okay, regardless. So why not make more money on the same product essentially? Okay, so that's the thing. But generally speaking, and this is proof is in the pudding through the previous generations of cards, you see that the bulk of the cards are the lower end spectrum ones for more budget conscientious builders, which is just the average layman, because we're not all rich. Okay, and it's about time that these type of bloggers cater towards the rich and that. But that's the thing, we all want to see what we can't have as well, and that's great, but let's be realistic here and let's be brutally and honest. Okay, I've already mentioned that those 3060s are just like 2070s essentially. Okay, it's sort of ridiculous. Let's continue on.
But I've been holding out for a 4K 144 hertz at 32 inches
Yeah.
because that will allow me to game and work on the one PC rather than having a... So yeah, it'll be very convenient, very nice. I'm looking forward to that.
So yeah, I think those sort of things are sort of the stuff that I find interesting that's coming out, sort of the more high-end releases. Whereas the good value stuff, I know you've mentioned that in this comment, and that's a key thing for our channel as well. Those tend to just filter out through the year. They don't tend to make a lot of fanfare. Again, most brands want to focus on their high-end stuff and sort of let you...
Because the high-end stuff brings you to the brand, okay? You want the prestige and pedigree of the high-end stuff, branded products, and then they can essentially sell you whatever they like, be it dribble or trash, and you're willing to buy it because you're associating the brand with the high-end stuff. Thank you for clarifying that, Tim, but you know, let's see how you sort of sway aside the obvious nature of what it actually is, okay, and how you have us perceive the opinions of yourselves, even though you guys aren't stupid, okay? You guys are not stupid. That's just an obvious thing that if you're hearing it for the first time, welcome to the club, guys.
All right, next question here. Should we skip Rocket Lake? Isn't Alder Lake supposed to be better in every way?
Okay, so again, if he wants to put himself in a position where he's not producing content for a borderline generation of CPUs in this instance, he's gonna say the truth. Yes, skip it. But again, he's then bottlenecking himself, pardon the pun, the terminology, he's bottlenecking himself, because what is it going to leave them to produce regarding content itself, especially if they are producing what's relevant and new? If they're providing information and seeming like it's insightful, then they should be saying, on the general end of the spectrum with good etiquette, that generally speaking, the newer stuff will probably be better. It always is. It works that way in the industry itself, and it should be the case that essentially when you walk out with an item from the computer store, it's depreciated in value instantaneously, because in 1 to 2 to 3 months time there's got to be something that replaces it that's bigger and better ultimately. And it's always been the case up until recently, where the value has stagnated and business keeps the value of the previous generation at the same level, and the new generation products are just going up and up and up. And then you've got the additional composites of things like tariffs, of things like this and that. But I'll tell you who actually, before COVID began and as it just began, you know, I saw it because I was purchasing items at the time. I was an avid purchaser at the time for builds and whatnot. They literally increased the prices of items overnight because they're savvy and they saw what was happening with the world very quickly. And before the cost of production increases, before anything, and it filtered down, before even manufacturing started to suggest this and the slowdown, they had stock on hand that they literally stripped from the store's inventory overnight and raised the prices of, say, for example, certain monitors $200 to $300 over bloody night.
Yeah, possibly. How these prediction type ones, we don't really know even really what we're getting with Rocket Lake apart from some leaked stuff and whatnot. Of course, now availability plays into these decisions massively, but it does seem like we will be getting the next generation of Intel and AMD CPUs potentially later in the year, I would have thought.
It's kind of a weird release cadence, isn't it?
It's
It sounds
very
like
strange.
Rocket Lake coming sort of maybe March time frame at a
So I've already heard that there's been an address made where cores will be starting to be restricted again, say on certain i9 varieties and whatnot. They're actually going to drop them in cores, surprisingly a couple, because of the higher frequencies and whatnot. It's almost like our innovative period with AMD coming into the forefront and into the mix, I should say, has pretty much ended, and I don't want a stagnation of another 10 years of this type of development that's been occurring through the negative Nancy's that almost tried to break Intel, okay? Because as soon as AMD has now become established, you notice that they have raised prices as well, okay? Saying the products aren't justified in value or whatnot, but this is what is occurring. I'm not saying I hate these companies because I love all their products, okay? But this is how it's working out through the business aspects of things, okay?
Yes, I know they've announced a certain time frame. I think it's Q1.
Yeah, it's definitely March. It's happening.
So March for that, and then Alder Lake, there's been rumors recently that even the desktop parts are coming in September. Now, how true that is, I don't know. That sounds to me more like a mobile sort of time frame, and I would expect to see mobile Alder Lake parts first. This is how Intel's been announcing all their products for the last couple of years. But it still presents an interesting situation if they did launch in the next half of the year, because would people be interested in upgrading to a CPU that's being replaced in 6 months? Or is it going to be a different
even if it's
product
early
segment?
next year, really, because DDR5.
Yeah.
Well, they'll do the general spiel. If you need a computer now, then you buy it now. If you don't and you're just thinking about upgrading, it's always the same spiel. And you have to say it because you have to be smart. If they know when the product launches are dropped and they're aware that there's potentially going to be massive gains, and they've got an obligation to be mentioning this information, but they like to restrict it and withhold it and play along and play the game, as people like to say the term. I hate this shit. I'm not playing a game, I'm living my life. Do not interrupt it with this sort of gamage approach. I play games when I want to play games. My life isn't a game, people. Neither should yours be.
Motherboards, memory, all that sort of stuff.
But there's still question marks over, is Rocket Lake going to be, say, the gaming CPU because of its high frequencies, its new IPC, that could potentially retake the gaming crown? Whereas on Alder Lake's side, it may be about a different type of processing. So maybe the first launch is more your productivity parts, considering there's been rumors of 16-core designs and maybe not being able to hit the frequencies that Rocket Lake can hit. So there's a lot of stuff to play out there that means that I don't think you can really just say Alder Lake is definitely going to be better and you should skip it, because we really don't know at this point.
We don't know. Yeah, we've got to see Rocket Lake, we've got to see prices, all that kind of stuff. And then ultimately only you can answer that anyway. You watch our day one review and then you make the decision whether you want Rocket Lake or Zen 3. Zen 3 is available. And do you need to upgrade right now, or can you hold out 6 to 12 months and see, then? Of course, you can always wait, but maybe you want to do it with a new GPU as well, and they may be still next to impossible to buy at that time. So a lot of things that need to be answered, but ultimately, really all we can do is provide you with a day one review as comprehensive as possible, and you go and make the decision from there.
They're going to provide us with a day one review, guys. Those processors may not even still be available. It may be the same continual affair and nightmare for the next year or two until something changes, until a new fab perhaps gets produced to compensate for the shortages and whatnot, where the profit margins can be justified. Okay, day one reviews. Well, can you review those AIB cards you're not really liking because no one can buy them, and it's not going to be happening for a while now? You did sort of eventually get to that point, you like to string us along, and I apologize if it seems like I'm stringing you along. Stuff that I'll make in the future will be a lot more pedigree in nature. This is my first type of audio style video content, and yeah, it's a learning curve for me as well. So let's continue on. I apologize. My name is Robbi Astral, and welcome to Robbi Tech. Please like and or follow or subscribe. I do have other content that isn't as controversial. I hope it never will be, where they are true premium unboxings, where they are proper overviews and reviews of products, where I'll tell you the ins and outs and guides on how to install products even. And eventually we'll get to some PC builds. At the moment I'm restricted to legacy builds. I've got some content coming out pertaining to a budget orientated $200 to $300 system with a couple of parts invested into your next primo build, which you can replace out of it, and you will be able to get gaming and keep current with your friends online at home in a desktop space until you've saved up enough for that unfortunately computer that just the other year would have cost you $2,500. Now it's going to cost you $3,500 to $4,000 Australian dollars at the very least.
When it comes to sort of when we know future products on the horizon, when it gets to like a couple of months beforehand, we tend to say that is the point that you would hold off. But with like a 6-month release cadence,
we're talking 2 generations.
Yeah, it's kind of in that weird zone where like 6 months is a decent amount in the future that around the Rocket Lake launch, you should probably just be considering that. But then a couple of months later, it starts getting to that point where normally we would start recommending you hold out and sort of see what the next generation is going to be. So
yeah,
it's going to be a weird situation.
What are the situations though? Like, what is the person asking this question, what is your situation? Are you without a computer now, or is your computer really old and just struggling to get by and it's a bit of
that's right.
a hassle for you?
See what I mean? Thanks, guys.
Like, all those things factor into the decision. If your computer is either you don't have one at all, or the thing you've got is just virtually unusable at this point, then really you're probably going to want to upgrade to Rocket Lake or Zen 3 or look at something, secondhand that's cheaper.
I mean, unless they're trying to appeal to a broader range of audience, which they're essentially should be doing for modernization and keeping themselves current and getting as many, like for the bottom dollar, they should be doing increase their viewer counts if they can. Then maybe this generalized information that we've currently seen for the first 15 minutes of this video is justified. But can you see how general everything is and how labored, and they've obviously chosen the questions they wanted to choose as well. Remember this, okay? Because there could be 1,000 other questions specifying when will you review this specific card, when will you do this specific review. And as new hardware reviewers, please don't step on my toes and start to come back to the older content as a justification. Those type of comparison videos between that. Hey, they're entitled to do what they like. After all, everyone's in competition. Well, it's a shame that the top-notch group of people are starting to band together as well to make it completely impossible to suffocate any nuances, new people entering the market in this regard who, are potentially of a better caliber and standing to be able to provide you with better information regardless of the caliber of production itself. I despise the new YouTube for this. I used to love the old YouTube. It means there was more 50,000 views videos rather than 1.7 million view juggernauts on certain topics all the time. There was more of that, which was great because for cross-referencing your stuff, you started to get a better rounded picture. Not anymore, people. And I'm hoping that with change and the continual nature and pushing for it, even YouTube will listen and understand, because for YouTube's interests, these type of video content providers are keeping you on the platform. But the funny part was that heaps of smaller providers can keep you on the platform as well. It's the same thing. It's just that it's easier for YouTube to pay a group of people rather than it is to pay off 1,000 people. Instead, it's 100 people for their payroll to deal with and whatnot. You get me?
Or if your computer, it's like, yeah, it works well enough. I'm just, wanting to spoil myself a bit and upgrade a bit earlier. In that situation, you're probably better off waiting because you'd get it seems like you'll be getting a whole platform upgrade to something more substantial. But
yep,
again, we're just guessing. So anyway, we'll move on. AMD was said to have secured additional manufacturing capacity at TSMC in the second half of 2020. Why are shortages of their products continuing? How long does it take to manufacture a CPU?
They're just easy questions for themselves to answer. I dislike this. I mean, the obvious answer in the industry is AMD's pushing their limits regarding the available manufacturing of their products for themselves to utilize in the products they have their AMD processors in, which obviously includes both Xbox and the new PlayStation. Okay, on top of that, leading industry, officially, unofficially leading industry CPUs, which are of the gaming performance, which essentially will space the desktop era in that regards. But also, enterprise-wise, they are somewhat more efficient as well currently. But we're gonna keep enterprise for the next series, I think. And this series, we're going to be nitpicky, and we're going to choose a select few people. There was also someone out of the perceived group that I'm referring to, because it's someone that I used to watch avidly as well, and I still do at times. I learn a lot from all of these people, including people like Carey Holtzman, for example. But sometimes a lot of the stuff he says it's for business. I do this, and he seems like he's being transparent, but then he completely lies to you as well.
Like, what's the lead time?
Yep.
I'm not actually sure on that one. We know with Ampere that the silicon was manufactured, I think there was 2 months lead time there from Samsung for the very first sort of review samples. That's a bit more extreme though, because they had to not only produce the silicon but also design the product around it. But it seems like 2 months based on that.
I think a couple of months tends to be the manufacturing lead time. So yeah, when it comes to manufacturing a CPU, it's not just about getting the silicon out of the factory. So obviously we've heard about the TSMC supply constraints and all that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. It then has to go and be packaged together with the substrates and all that. And then after that's done, put into the box, shipped to the retailers, all that sort of thing. So I believe when it comes to manufacturing the actual silicon wafers, it's not too long, but then all the rest of that stuff takes a bit of time, especially because the area that they make the CPUs, like for example, they get the wafers out of the factory in Taiwan, for example, it could then be packaged in an entirely different country. So all that stuff takes time. And yeah, why the shortages of their products continuing? I think we've talked about this a few times on the channel before. They're simply trying to make too many products on the one node. Maybe too many is not the...
Okay, so the truth be told, that's what's occurring essentially with every IT CPU. Well, the big players, AMD and Intel, as well as the GPU market regarding the Radeon cards from AMD, as well as NVIDIA 3000 series. They are trying to create more that's available, and these fabs cannot cope with demand. The crazy part is that for example, using NVIDIA as an example, the Founders Edition 3080s, supposedly the rumor mill is saying that there was only 20,000 of those cards available upon release, okay? The excuses were that they didn't fathom it to be as popular as it was, yet NVIDIA itself is smart enough to realize that with the performance gains that they were going to propose to us, okay, they know that it would have been lapped up, okay? So NVIDIA has an interest where they make more money with their reference cards and selling them off to AMD rather than producing their Founders Edition cards. It's a shame because essentially the MSRP of that Founders Edition 3080 was at its lowest point at an entry level, never going to exist as a purchase price for anyone. So they tried to make themselves and position themselves as, you know, the good guys, when in actual fact this was a calculated move by their part. Okay, let's continue on.
Right word, but the demand for all of the products across all the lines is very high.
Very popular products. Demand is extreme.
Yeah.
Obviously, Radeon GPUs are in extreme demand. There's virtually no supply of those.
Yep.
Zen 3 CPUs, extreme demand, which is why we're not seeing the non-X versions. They're not going to exist anytime soon. Then you've got the consoles. We've still got like Zen 2 parts. So
you got the server line, which is obviously a very high margin product. So there's a lot of incentive for AMD to sell like an Epic CPU instead of a 5600X, for example, because it just makes a lot more sense to get the volume and get the big margins on that. So yeah, it's been kind of a perfect storm for TSMC, being able to sell everything at maximum capacity, and kind of I guess AMD's just had record revenue, so can you really say it's like a nightmare for them? Because they're selling literally the most that they could possibly sell right now.
Yeah, it's a nightmare for their customers. It's a great situation for them to be in. I'm sure they're not minding too much at all. What a luxurious position to be in as someone who's selling something, to be able to sell it basically as you're making it.
It's crazy.
Yeah, so... okay, so I guess this is not a bad question to follow on from, really, because we kind of answered it. When will budget GPUs arrive, and do you think they will be or go out of stock as fast as the higher end parts?
Well, they'll arrive once they've exhausted their higher end scenario regarding the availability for them to produce the products to begin with, because the profit margins, again, it's mentioned by Tim, he at least mentioned the Epic as opposed to the 5600. You know, the Epics are just, you know, stuck together multiple smaller chips with higher profit margins, essentially, that gets strung out to corporate companies and that at even higher profit margins still. When we'll see them, that is a question exactly. But the follow-up was, let's get into it.
AMD already have all these 7nm, they have a heap of products that are using the same nodes. So they have a manufacturing bottleneck. And yeah, they might be pumping them out in a reasonable volume, at least for some of those products. But again, the demand is so...
So when it comes to the yields, okay, you have to understand that the yields themselves are of a quality nature that they can pick and choose the same nanometer product wafer for a CPU in that instance, or a GPU. And because it's of a high caliber, it gets placed into the bin for that. If all GPUs are going to be a high caliber and they've exhausted their option for selling to the higher market with the higher premium products, then they'll be locking those GPUs or locking CPUs like they have in previous past to allow for them to be sold to the lower end spectrum, because there's less of a profit margin, but they still make profit. And there's no more of the higher class people in that regards to sell to. Do you understand? That's how it's going to work, and that's how it's going to play out. Until then, we're not going to see those, in bulk at least, mid-range budget orientated GPUs that, generally speaking, over the period and lifespan of a generation, will actually outsell the other GPUs. But then again, you have to understand, if it's 1-to-3 ratio of outselling, or 3-to-1 in that sense, and those premium GPUs cost 3 times the amount and continue to sell, then why would they want to have to produce more products when they don't have to? This may or may not be articulated as, you know, it's poetic justice, essentially, people. These guys are meant to be experts in their right mind, in their sense. So please start providing information. It hasn't been as drastic as I was expecting, because I went over this first 20 minutes before and I had some really deep stuff to say. It's not coming to me at the moment, but we'll give it another 5 minutes and we'll see where we're going, okay?
That they're just selling everything they can make as they make it. So the incentive for them to go make more products isn't there. Also, they can't because they just don't have the capacity for more dies, because it requires more wafers for different dies to create smaller GPUs. So really, they're in a position now where it's not possible to physically make like a 6700 series GPU. So that's the situation there.
I think the only reason we would see a low-end GPU from an AMD perspective is if it's like a bin of a higher-end chip that they're already manufacturing. Yeah. So on the GPU side, with the 6800, we're probably unlikely to see that.
Thank you, Tim.
That die binned into an even lower part.
Well, that's where they would have made those calculations, which is why the 6800 is where it is.
On Zen, I guess there's like an outside chance that you might see a 5600 if they can't bin as many 5600Xs. But I imagine by now on 7 nanometer, they've got enough of a...
Yeah, the problem you run into there is it's very much like a Ryzen 3 3300X situation. So they'll be collecting an inventory of those dies that can't be used as 5600Xs. They'll become perhaps 5600s or something lower. And that's all good and well, but they'll only get so many of those dies. They put them on sale. They will sell out very quickly.
Lies. Like I just explained, they could get as many as they want, but they don't need to. If the yields are good enough to produce 5600Xs, then they're going to use that same chip they would use then for a 5600 and continue to get a higher profit margin on that chip. It's as simple as that. And why he won't actually say it in that way is shocking and scary, people.
And then they're faced with a situation where they take silicon that could be sold at a higher margin to then fulfill the orders for those lower end parts. And obviously they didn't do that. Well, they have done it in the past when they've been a bit more desperate for sale.
Of course. It's the obvious. It's what I've summed up. I sum it up in a sentence and they just elaborate and elongate the video for the purpose of monetizing and having as much ad revenue as well coming out of their stuff. Because, you know, there are certain depictions and videos and certain standards. 10 minutes, 30 minutes is another one. They've hit over 34 minutes and 35 seconds this video from them.
Yeah, well, that's usually a situation where CPUs are already, you know, there's a supply, there's an oversupply of CPUs. So you would make lower end parts in that situation because you still want to get sales in across all the segments. Whereas
no, if there's an oversupply of CPUs and the sales are still occurring for the higher ones, they don't want to get sales in all segments because the CPUs can be bin. If the bin quality is lower, that's when they've got no choice and they will allow it to be the case. Or if, coming back to what he said, on a technicality, if there is the oversupply, then they know that they've covered their bases with the premium people and the premium products being sold so that they can take those chips and lock them and have the identical chips being sold. That's how it should be articulated and not sugarcoated in the way that he's doing currently. Sorry, Tim.
The supply constrained like we are right now, there's no incentive to sell a part as a, let's say, a Ryzen 5 quad core, for example, a Ryzen 3 quad core, over like a 5950X because all of them are just going to get sold out.
Except for one thing, guys. The one thing that there's no incentive for, there's one reason, because it would have to be a lot cheaper and because it would fill a market that's desperate for new products and availability, okay? Because you're literally paying for those products now, second-hand products, they've gone up in value and you're paying what will be the equivalent of those products coming out to the market, be it as new products, you'd assume. That's why the price hikes on the new generation is higher. The old generation stock was still on the shelves. It remained on the same prices. Okay, this is partially to blame as well for increase. It's the type of business structuring that's occurring now. I noticed that we've really started to notice it back when Samsung released the Samsung 10 phones. And I'm like, hang on a minute. Yeah, it's because no one really needs to upgrade their phones regarding what they're actually and how they're utilizing them. And the new Samsung 10 Plus in that sense was the equivalent of the 9. Was, I thought, well, as the 9s get older, they will go down in price and the new generation will replace it because the technology isn't as effective as the new generation stuff. No, regardless, the trend started to be that, no, we don't have to do that. We can just say it's better and justify more. So until there's a cap, until they can't sell products, every new generation, this is scary, people, understand, the new stuff is going to be more and more and more, and not because of inflation, people, because of capital fucking greed.
Which is exactly what happened with Zen 2.
Yes.
So anyway, to answer the question, look, they could announce them shortly, but I don't think so. Given everything we know and the supply issues they currently face, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't make sense for them to do it. So kind of a rough position to be in.
NVIDIA is potentially a different situation
NVIDIA
because they use Samsung's 8nm manufacturing instead of TSMC, so they potentially don't have as much of a supply constraint. Obviously, right now, they can't get enough 3080s, 3090s, all those products out, but there's still a potential that, for example, the defect rate of that silicon is enough that making a 3080 is potentially a bit dicey right now, whereas making a smaller die for, say, a 3050 type product makes more sense for them. There's all sorts of dynamics going on there that would depend on like the defect rate, the costs of the silicon, how future defects are projecting, all that sort of thing.
We have no idea about yields. We don't exactly know where all the GPUs are going.
Well, we do know, unless they're accumulating these products to make them, they're in a position to line them up and have them out now as well, okay? So we do know that the yields are great. We do know that the yields are of a higher caliber and standard. We do know that they can justify, and we do know that the 3080s and 3090s and what such products, that's what we're talking about, 3080s and 3090s, are continuing to sell, and their yield ratios of production availability, even though Samsung 8nm is, if not constrained, complete and utter hogwash and bullshit, but if constrained, to some level, because they can't keep up with demands of 3080s and 3090s for the basic end of the spectrum, then no, they're not going to. They're not going to. It's as simple as that. So that's why a lot of avid viewers, they're trying to relate to you, but the way they're saying the right things to a degree. They're saying it finally after saying stuff for 20 odd minutes on an opposing generalized sale. They're getting into the nitty gritty, but this is where by then the general layman has tuned out. This is not for them because they're trying to build a system and get relevant information and whatnot, and the people who, the fanboys and that, they're hanging on, and they're essentially getting the rounded spectrum of it, but just not articulated in the way that it should be, as forthcoming as they should be. Okay,
so it's just all speculation.
So I think NVIDIA's
speculation. That seems to be Steve's go-to now, just to round up a topic and just be like, meh, you know, because we're not going to give you what I'm actually saying to be, you know, because you can't be speculative like that. Where's your proof, Robbi? Where's your proof? Robbi Astral from Robbi Tech. Thank you. I appreciate all the likes and follows, and thank you for your continuing support. Well, speculatively speaking and analytically speaking, there's a form of process that can be completely justified through history itself, okay, guys, and how it works out, and if you understand the industries per se. Now, these guys want to neglect the information, yet they understand it clear as day, okay? They want to pretend it's not there, you know, but come on, guys, let's not sugarcoat the fact that you guys have to be aware of this, okay? Otherwise, you wouldn't be knocking back cards and things like that, or suggesting that it's the case, because the backlash is that, you know, how are you guys getting these things? How did, you know, Brian get a Founders Edition 3080 in Australia? How did they get a Founders Edition 3080 in Australia? Was it given to them by NVIDIA? Was it not? If it wasn't, there was only 1,000 available in Australia on launch, and there haven't been any since. And it was produced by one company, M-Wave, and they ended up raffling them off. Okay, so how the 10 biggest tech Australian producers got all 3080s, it just seems a bit odd that 1% went to them instantaneously, and none of them admitted that they actually got the products from them in NVIDIA.
Probably the only shot that we have right now of a budget GPU, and even then, who knows what's happening there. Whereas AMD is definitely out for the time being, and I think they've even said in their latest earnings call that lower end products are not on the radar for them anytime soon. So,
which makes sense.
Yeah, it makes
based on
sense.
everything we just said. Next question here.
No, it makes sense, but you should have been saying it the way I bloody said, you know, maybe articulate it in your way, but not to be like, makes sense, actually, then why not just start with that? It could have just stopped the whole conversation from flowing. Did they really need this much information, like this much content to get through the Q&A for January part 1? What other questions did they exclude that could have been a lot more forthcoming or fruitfully adhered to by the viewers and actually given them viewerships as well? This is the decision making that I'm starting to struggle with the direction, Steve. No, I don't really want to do the new stuff, but the new stuff should be ready to go as soon as it's available. That means he's got so much confidence in the longevity of the shortages that it's crazy like. And it starts to paint a picture with the industry on the whole as well and how it's becoming.
When can we expect DDR5 to arrive? I remember we answered this question like...
Okay, not DDR5, but DDR6 already exists at the very least. Again, it's an industry standard of leaching it out. When 6 exists, why not just skip 5? Go figure. Why would you not? It's because they can't give us too much tech and too much innovation at once. And see what I mean? That's the scary part. We needed AMD to kick Intel in the balls, but then it's quickly enough, they've become just like petrol stations side by side. They're price matching each other already.
A year and a half ago in a Q&A, and we said 2021. Which is technically correct because DDR5 does now exist.
Yes.
But when will we see it on a mainstream desktop platform, I think is probably the question here. And I'm expecting that to be like an AMD Zen 4 thing, as we spoke of earlier. We think that's coming towards the end of the year, but...
Yeah, it's still a bit unclear whether AMD is going to have like a stopgap release, like a Zen 3 Plus before they get into Zen 4, or whether they'll just go straight to Zen 4. And then obviously DDR5 is allegedly coming to Intel's Alder Lake platform as well. So that they've said that's coming
basically
late 2021. So
yeah, as a
around
really
that time.
as a really rough guesstimate, and it really is a guesstimate, late this year at the absolute earliest. But certainly certainly sometime next year, you would think.
Yes, I would say much more widespread adoption coming in sort of the 2022 timeframe. Whereas for now, still got a bit of a wait on it.
Yep. We know you guys like to make YouTube videos, but do you like to watch them too? If so, what YouTube channels do you enjoy, tech or non-tech, when time permits?
Okay, I'm curious about this. I haven't gotten this far into the video before. I'm believing it'll be an educated / non-controversial answer. So it's like, either they don't have time or they do like stuff that's not direct competition to them, or they're going to mention their partners right now. Get me? Okay, so you may or may not feel me get flipped out in a second's time.
If not, what movies or TV shows are you into? So I don't watch too much tech-related content unless I'm doing like research or whatever. I try to watch it.
I fucking hope you watch a ton of it, or you read about it specifically from real sources, because you guys are meant to be the source for new hardware. Is that how you're positioning yourself? Please, those AIBs that you have sitting around, let me borrow them and I will do them justice so that they're ready to go for people who want to purchase them as soon as they become available. Okay? Yeah, but the way the videos work, Rob, is You know, we got a 50 to 100,000 cap on our videos in some way, shape or form. We're trying to increase our viewership numbers to get that higher. And if we release those now and it takes 2 to 3 months, then those videos aren't current and the algorithm will not push them forwards once they're capped. They will not get more viewers as a result.
A couple of the guys that we talked to on that, but obviously they're releasing videos as rapidly as we are, and it's hard enough watching our own content to proof it and stuff like that without going and watching everyone else's. So generally when I'm benchmarking, I like to have something going, and I usually watch YouTube, I'd say mostly. As many of you guys know, I love fishing and that and sort of outdoor stuff because I don't get to do a whole lot of it because I'm usually indoors benchmarking.
Completely businessly, adequately, politically correct, you know. Just throw them off, don't mention the competition. If they at all mention anyone, $100, they're all on Floatplane.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar, to be honest, with especially with the tech stuff. I think both of us sort of, when you're making a lot of tech content and you want to just sit down and relax or watch something else, tech videos tend not to be like the top of the priority list. So yeah, I might watch like a couple of Gamers Nexus or Linus Tech Tips videos from time to time.
Bang! There it is, boys. Gamers Nexus and Linus Tech Tips, who they aspire to reach to and take away, but who are almost borderline capped in the way, and there's just so many viewers that are available, so it's a trickle-down effect. And have they been promoted? Has hardware been promoted? Hardware Unboxed being defended, but they've also been promoted by both Linus Tech and Steve Burke from Hardware Unboxed. I first met Steve in forums 10 plus years ago regarding overclocking. He's probably changed the least regarding his stance and the way he is perceived. He's a little cleaner, but there are a couple of hidden ghosts in his closet or whatnot as well, which we may or may not get to if I can find that footage, just to relate to it and go, why didn't you bother mentioning the voltages, Steve? You never actually adequately mentioned those running voltages on those CPUs and the longevity potentially pertaining to whether those standardized default voltages would actually affect those CPUs. But we'll get into another day. What CPUs do you ask? If you know, to shame for not disliking.
All right, next question here. When should someone consider going from a top-end Ryzen to a Threadripper system? So this is kind of an interesting one because you have gone from Threadripper to top-end Ryzen and sort of considering going back to Threadripper. Yep. But basically, obviously, it's someone who is doing productivity-type workloads, who needs a lot of cores. When should you consider? It's really, well, I suppose you would have
to answer it. It's the cost effectiveness. Also, if you're running a business, then you would go to the Threadrippers. You can get it done as a business, depreciating asset in that regards, and all business expenses and whatnot. Then you have to ask yourself the costs, because the clocks will be lower for gaming depending on how you want to utilize it, if you want versatility and whatnot. And how much productivity do you get from those boost cores? Simple answer to explain, but anyway.
You have to have a workload that uses a lot of cores, and you're wanting to speed up that workload because time's money. That would essentially be it, really. So you would go from something like a 3950X or 5950X to one of the third gen Threadripper parts, or the upcoming 4th gen 5000 series Threadripper parts.
Yeah, and generally when making that switch, you're going to be losing a little bit from your top end frequency in terms of single thread performance. Not always the case, but that can be a consideration. So it's not going to be a gaming situation where you're going to be, for example, like a gaming plus content creation system. You're probably more going to stick to your top end Ryzen, but for pure content creation.
For purely business aspects, the companies want you to buy 2 computers, one for content creation and one for that. That's how they try to set it up. There could be an easy way in profile management to be able to disable cores and raise frequencies as a result, so that it mitigates the heat that is dispersed in the CPU on the whole from the utilization of all cores being activated. That's something that companies could do, but it means you wouldn't have 2 computers then, would it? You just have one really good chip. And companies AMD's already latched onto the Intel motto. They look like the savers. Now they're both positioned to, at least there's going to be an oligopoly in the desktop space. Not a monopoly, but I don't think it's much better in that sense. You know, we need at least 3 or 4 big players in the CPU desktop space market to really drive business to be more competitive for consumer sakes.
And that is when you switch over. Maybe memory bandwidth might be a consideration for you as well if you've got a very memory sensitive workload.
Depends what you're prioritizing, really.
Yeah, you might need workstation features like better PCI compatibility, better more slots on your board, more SATA ports, more USB, which you tend to get those features with higher end.
I guess it's one of
Threadripper
those
boards.
questions where the answer is, if you have to ask, you're not ready to make the jump.
Yeah,
It's
because
like-
if you're still in the prosumer line where you sort of, am I getting 3950X, am I getting Threadripper, then probably should more tend towards Ryzen.
Yep.
I think Threadripper really is for if you have a known specific workload that benefits from Threadripper, then that
Look, to be brutally honest, if you are into content creation and that, and you're just doing 1080p video, even a 5600X will be fine. It's not going to make too much of a difference. It's once you do 4K, 8K footage rendering and things like that, and you've got hours and hours and hours of footage, that's when those workload rates make a difference. That's when something that would be an hour long and in 1080p may take 15 minutes to render, something that's an hour long in 4K may take 30 to 40 minutes to render. Get me? And if you can then take that 40 minutes because you need those tube clips, but you as a business you've got 3 or 4, 5 hours of that, and that 40 minutes is multiplied by 3 or 4, and you can half that amount of time, that's big world dollars that are being saved here. Okay, so yeah, it's simple. They don't want to step on enterprises' foot and whatnot. They don't want to step on the consumer line's foot and whatnot, and they will never mention these sort of little things that are being neglected, because ultimately, you know, Nvidia did what they did, but Nvidia's sort of in their right mind to do it. That was just a negative PR backlash. But they can do it. The difference is these guys do something very, very similar, and in actual fact are not painting the picture on the general scheme of things. They all aren't, guys. They all aren't. Okay? You have to understand this, and it gets worse as we continue on. This was a good video for a warm-up for myself, okay, regarding my own outrage. And we're probably going to leave it there. At the very least, it may have not been as controversial as you were expecting, or as I may have made you believe at the beginning, but understand that what I'm providing you as well is an insight into what's not being said, not what is being said. And when it's not said correctly, I'm going to correct them and jump on them instantaneously like a goddamn pit bull. Okay, so I'm doing this for you, okay? I'm not doing this for myself, okay? I've stopped watching these shows. I've stopped watching the players. I prefer to start out with smaller independents in that way, shape or form, that hopefully aren't getting pushed around, okay? Because I love all the products myself personally as well. I guess if I was rich and it didn't matter, I wouldn't think about it twice, but I'd still be conscientious. Purchaser, wouldn't I? So guys, my name's Robbi Astral. Please hit the like, follow, and or subscribe, share button for Robbi Tech rated content, YouTube channels. Social links are in the top right of the video that you are watching. Otherwise, it is Robbi Tech on all fronts, both YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. Okay, so that's Robbi Tech, ROBBITEK, and it's tech inspired elegance tweak. Okay, guys. So that's what I want to produce for you guys, essentially, when it comes to builds and stuff. Tech inspired, but elegance tweaked. So, you know, you can get the right prices, PC specs that will negate those elegant Apple machines and whatnot, but instead will cost you 2/3 or half the price of those primo machines, and that's how it was. Hopefully it won't be changed into that. COVID has actually produced a lot of enthusiasts regarding PC building, and that's partially why, not because everyone's at home, but because everyone's had the time to learn how to do it themselves finally. Do you get me? And then they realize the profit differentials as well. Okay, so I'm going to steer you in the right direction as well. I'm going to help you produce good quality hardware setups for yourself. I will always provide you with the right recommendations based upon my experiences, as well as what I learn and my own cross-referencing and researching abilities, okay, which I am quite well renowned for in other circles, okay, in other departments. And I'm started to apply this into the hardware sector of PC development and the community on the whole. Okay, so thank you for all your time. I appreciate, guys, I appreciate all the support. Please hit the like button. Please forgive me at the very least. Anything I say isn't meant to be controversial. It's meant to be an accurate portrayal of what should be said by especially the bigger players. I could go to some smaller players and really wreak some havoc, but it is what it is, and these guys are in the limelight. I want to watch their content as well. I do want to watch Hardware Unboxed. I love watching Linus Tech. I love Steve Burke, okay? Gamers Nexus. I enjoy tech deals. I enjoy Bitwit. I enjoy all the comedy, but not when I hear the bullshit coming out of their mouths, okay? And the more and more I hear it, the more I have to turn off, and I watch them as reference material as the last part and gasp and effect. So I watch all the other players first, which aren't being watched, okay, for the same information, but it's sometimes more rounded, surprisingly, with less of an agenda, because they have yet to be picked up by sponsors, advertisement, whatnot, YouTube, view counts, everything like that. And then I move on. I also read material. I read the product descriptions and specs, and I understand how it all works. And I'm doing this all for you now. Until I'm not making a buck from this, not yet. Until I do, guys, peace out. My name's Robbi Astral. Thank you for joining me at Robbi Tech, and we'll be back sooner rather later. And maybe check my integrity video, which should be linked to this, which sums up in general my approach to the no-bull approach to producing content for you, and how these guys should be acting. And then you're going to see how I may be fired up regarding future content in this series. Peace out, guys.